Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover Podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. Publisher Ronnie Sanders is here, joined by a very special guest on the show today, legendary defensive line coach, former Auburn defensive line coach. He's also been around the block in college football and the pros. Pete Jenkins has been kind enough to hop on the show today. Pete, hope you're doing well, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, it's been a long time since we've seen each other. We've talked on the phone a few times.
Yeah,
but
it has been. It has been a while, Ronnie. That's your fault, though.
It is. That's right. That's what Coach Witt says. He said he always told me he always introduced me as his son, and then he called me. We've been out of touch a little while, a few years ago, and he said you're like my prodigal son.
I got to spend time with Joe. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was at Auburn for a week, and I got to spend some time with Joe. One of the best, man. I'm telling you, what a great guy. And, you don't know this, but Joe and I was at Troy State, and Joe was a high school coach in Montgomery at Jeff Davis.
Mm-hmm.
No, not Jeff Davis. I'm sorry, Robert E. Lee. And we got to know each other through the recruiting. So we go back 50 years, I guess.
I didn't realize that.
That's scary to even think about. But he was a guy that I always wanted to coach with. And, sometimes you coach with guys and you're a little disappointed. Maybe it didn't live up to what your expectations were. But I can tell you this, Ronnie. Coaching with Joe, I had high expectations, but it exceeded my expectations. I mean, that guy is he is one of the best. Not only on the field, I thought he was such a great example for our players, and just a really and truly good man.
I when I got there in 1996 and met all you guys, it was we hit it off pretty quick. He had that farm out there, and I grew up on a farm, so I'd go out there and take care of his horses and his cows and his
I remember that. I'll tell you a funny story. Joe and I had been on a recruiting trip one day, and we were in the car. We were coming back. I guess we landed in Montgomery, or we came through Montgomery, but we came by Wire Road out there, where
Mm-hmm.
Joe has his farm. And he had to do something, put his cows away or something. And so we drove in there. It was cold. Whoo! Well, it was a cold day. And I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and I said, Joe, you want me to get out and help you? In fact, we laughed about this the other day. Well, Joe, knowing that I knew nothing, okay, he said, no, Pete, you just make yourself comfortable. He said, I'm gonna leave the radio on and the heater going, and I'll take care of it. I'll take care of this. He didn't want me out there around the cows, I guess. I don't know.
I didn't get that lucky. I had to.
No, I remember you worked for him. You worked for him out there. I remember, yeah.
I tell you what, he loaded me up, and he said, we're gonna go get some chicken litter. And what I didn't realize, we drove an hour and a half, wherever it was. I don't even remember now. And he had his truck, and I was the one loading the chicken litter.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a good man, boy. I'll tell you. He's been great for Auburn, and Auburn's been great to him too.
It's he's one of the best.
Yeah, he is.
Talk a little bit about when you got to Auburn and how you got there.
Yeah, okay. All right. So I was at Mississippi State, and I had made plans to leave, okay? And Butch Davis was the head coach at Miami. And that's where it looked like I was going to go. I talked to a couple of people, but it looked like I really liked Butch, and I thought Butch was a real good football coach. And it looked like I was going to Miami. They were doing very well at the time, too. And it looked like I was going to go to Miami and work for Butch. And so was, I was basically cleaning out my desk, to be honest with you. And brother called me. And he said, I just took this job over here at Auburn. You want to come over here and help me? Well, normally I would go home and I would discuss that with Donna, and she never said no, but I feel like, you should at least discuss it with her. But I felt pretty safe in taking the Auburn job. I felt like I'd get an approval on that because I know how so I drive up into the drive and she's in the yard and she walks over to the car and I said, where would you really like to go? We're talking about Miami and I said, where would you really like to go? And she said, well, you know where I'd like to go. I'd like to go to Auburn. And I said, well, okay, let's go. I said, we'll do it. And she said, well, we're going to need a job first. And I said, no, let's go. I said, we want to get packed and let's go. We're going to move to Auburn. And she looked at me, she said, are you serious? I said, yeah. And I'm telling you, Ronnie, tears started coming down that girl's face, and I said, wait now, we'll go to Miami if I don't want to make you, I thought you'd be happy. I am happy. So anyways, that's when I broke the news to her. And she did remember seeing that brother had gone to Auburn. And God bless him, brother. And that's so sad, man. Losing.
It sure was. It sure was.
Yeah. Anyways, she had remembered that brother had just gone to Auburn. And brother and I had always been good friends. And brother and I are always wanted to work together. We talked about working together and hoping it would happen someday and everything. So anyways, that's how that thing kind of unfolded. And it was a happy move for both of us, to be honest with you. So I had to tell them at Miami, and that was the hard part, that I wasn't coming because I'd pretty much taken that job. But I've done that before too, so I knew how to do that. Right.
I remember the first time I did that. I was waiting on you and Trickett to get me to LSU, and Jack Crow had offered me a job at Jacksonville State. Yeah. And I kept putting him off. And Coach Saban finally called me, and I came down there, and I had to tell Jack he was not real happy with me.
Yeah. Yeah, I did one that way too. And the head coach didn't speak to me for 2 years. But I took a job I took a job in the morning. I got another opportunity in the evening, and I took that job also. So I joke about working at both. I was working at both those places at the same time. Of course, I didn't ever report to one of them, but I took the other job. Went to Florida, actually, where I went, and it was really basically that I wanted to be in the conference, in the Southeastern Conference, and the other one was not in the Southeastern Conference. But the head coach at the other place wasn't really happy with me when I told him I'd changed my mind. And he didn't speak to me for a couple of years, but he finally forgave me, which I was glad he did.
Yeah, I remember you telling me a long time ago that Auburn was the only job you ever took without talking to Donna.
There you go. I felt I was safe. You know what I mean? I felt I was safe on that one because that girl loves Auburn, man, I'm telling you. But, people, it's just amazing how Auburn has that kind of effect on people. They once they go, I know people who love LSU football. I know people who love Florida football or Alabama football, but they don't retire and move back. The thing about the Auburn attraction is not just the university, it's the city, the town. People always retiring, going back to Auburn and everything. And they don't retire and go to Baton Rouge. You don't hear them do that, So it's a special place, I think. It really is. It's a very kind place and a very caring place.
Coach Dye, his famous quote was, Alabama fans love Alabama football. Auburn fans love Auburn.
Yeah, and he's absolutely right about that too. That's the way I found it to be.
Well, Nathan, you want to jump in?
Well, Pete, I wanted to ask you, a couple off seasons ago, Vontrell King Williams here at Auburn mentioned to us that he spent about a week with you in the off season. He described it as the foxhole, and he said he learned a lot about teaching defensive line, and it's his first power job that he had at Auburn. Getting a raise from being an analyst up to an SEC defensive line coach. What do you remember about getting to know him? Do you recall that offseason that you guys had a week or two together?
Well, we've really done it 3 times because we just did it a couple of weeks ago. The first one, though, one of the things I remember is JG was actually there too. Jeremy Garrett was there at that time. He was Jeremy's helper at that time, and one of the things that sticks out in my mind, they didn't feed me. I kept telling them because when I do those things, people have lunch brought in. We don't normally go out for lunch or anything, but they didn't have anything brought in, and I've been going since about 7:00 that morning, and the motor was running down a little bit, and I said, hey, where the hell is lunch? But they were great, and they had a really good thing going there, and Vontrell still does. When I was over there this last time, I mean, his office was full of kids watching film, coming in there to ask him questions or to talk football with him, or he and JG both, I thought, really had that group of kids had really bought in. They didn't have the greatest ability, but they really bought in. Now they look a little better right now. I think Auburn's defense looks better, and they played pretty good defense last year. But I think their defense looks better. It's a little bigger, it's a little faster, I think, and I think if they stay healthy, of course, everybody has that. That to deal with, staying healthy. But I think if they stay healthy, they'll be a good defensive football team. I was impressed with them in spring practice.
How many games can they win this year?
Ronnie, I don't know because the ball's oblong. It ain't round. It don't always bounce the way you want it to. And I would starve to death being a prognosticator of games. I know a little bit about the game. But, there's so many variables in a game. Are you going to throw an interception for a pick six and whatever and turn the game around? Or I don't know. But I think they're a better football team. That doesn't always equate to wins either, even though you're a better football team. But I look for them to have a good season. I don't know if they're ready to take on some of the teams on the schedule, but I like Coach Freeze a lot. I think he's a regular guy. He does a good job. He handles the staff extremely well. I've never talked to an assistant coach that had a bad thing to say about Hugh Freeze. Never. I've known him a long time.
That's rare.
Yeah, it is.
It
really is. Because it's a hard position. You got to demand people do, and you got to hold them accountable. It's a hard job. Along with all the other things. And when we got that NIL and portal, we just put another couple of layers of problems on people, and but I think he does a good job. I think he's much more comfortable with everything right now. I think he likes the quarterback situation. So I'm looking for him to have a pretty good season. And I don't, in numbers, I don't know, but I hope they win a bunch of them. Because that's a good staff and a good bunch of people. They work hard, and I think all of them are really happy to be at Auburn.
I want to jump back to 20 years again. Let's talk a little bit about that staff. We had a pretty good staff those couple of years. We had Jimbo and Tommy Bowden and Rick Trickett and Joe Witt and Brother Oliver and you, and we had some pretty good coaches.
Yeah, Jack Hines was an effective coach too.
That's right.
He was. He did it different than most anybody I'd ever known.
Me
But he
too.
was, but he was effective. He was an effective coach, and yeah, I really enjoyed my time there. I really did. And Terry has said to me a number of times that he thought the '97 season was maybe the best coaching job one of his staffs had done. I mean, that team we were pretty good, and won the West, and got beat by 1 point in the SEC championship, and that came late. We should have won that ball game, really. And then we go over there to Clemson and kick them like a yard dog in the Peach Bowl. They made 4 first downs.
I didn't realize. I don't think I remembered that. That's pretty strong.
In my phone, I carry those stats around. Okay, I carry it around because I tell this story a lot of places I go. At halftime, Clemson had. Now, they blocked a punt for a touchdown, and they blocked a punt that they got a field goal out of it. It was like 10-0 at halftime. So, brother, God bless him, we go in at halftime, and brother says, in that draw, he said, Pete, I guess we better change our early down configuration. They probably got a bead on us by now. And I said, well, brother, they made 1 first down rushing and they made 1 first down passing. I said, unless they can find them 2 better tackles at halftime, they ain't going to be able to block our ass in the second half either. And brother, brother, boy, he's such a good guy. Boy, he said, he sat there and he rolled it around just a minute and he said, all right now. And I knew what that meant. If this don't go well now, it's on you. He said, all right now. Oh, unbelievable. So we go back out there in the second half and we stay with what we've been doing. I'm one that don't want to get off a horse if he's winning the race. I'm going to just tell you. I mean, I ain't jumping off and getting me another one. I'm going to stay on that one. So, ironically, we go back out there, Ronnie, and I got the stats. And I take that around my phone because I tell this story, and I tell it in teaching that if it's good and if it's working and it's doing well, don't try something else just to be for the hell of it. Stay with, make them change, make you change. Anyways, long story short, we go back out there, and in the second half, sounds like a fairy tale, but I got the stats right here. 1 first down rushing and 1 first down passing. So for the game, they had 4 first downs, 2 rushing and 2 passing. So brother never said a word. We never even discussed it and everything. We never even talked about it again. But I was kind of relieved, to tell you the truth, that we did that well in the second half because remember what he said, all right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what that meant, Ronnie. I knew exactly where he was coming from. But fortunately, it worked out good for us, and the kids played really good, and we won that game. And we scored enough points in the second half. We didn't score, I don't believe, in the first half. But we got points in the second half and won that game. So, that was a really good season. I thought the guys played daggum good in that game.
They played hard, and everybody bought in. Terry told me the same thing not too long ago. He said, that's the best coaching job that
he wanted his staff, and because we were talented in some areas, but we weren't super talented. But the kids really played good, and I thought Terry did a good job of handling that team.
It was I forgot what I was going to say now. Nathan, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Pete, I was just going to ask, you mentioned.
I liked your last question, Nathan. Did I answer that thing like? You
did, absolutely.
You did.
Well,
absolutely.
Let me tell you, I think Montrell is a really good young football coach. There's several things. Watching him a couple of weeks ago, watching spring practice, and I've told him this too. One of the things that I think is really impressive watching him is his kids. They're bought in. I mean, you can look at them in the meetings, and you can tell the way they come around during the day when they got free time. He's got them. I mean, they believe in him, and I think that's a really important thing. You need to start with that. They believe in what you're saying, and they believe in you, and I see that. So I really enjoyed Vontrell. I don't know if you're the one that did that. He sent me a little clip a couple of years ago. Maybe that was last year, but he sent me a little clip. Somebody had interviewed him about that visit. And like I say, the only complaint I had, I just wondering where the heck lunch was, But they finally fed me. And it was really ironic. They ordered Jimmy John's, and we were all laughing about. I was at Kentucky one time years ago, and Jimmy Brumbaugh ordered from Jimmy John's. And I swear, he ordered some sandwiches, and he hardly put the phone down. I hear a knock at the door, and it's Jimmy John's. So I was looking for him to come fast, and they brought the wrong lunches. Yeah, they brought the wrong lunches, but they fixed it. They fixed it, straightened it out. But anyways, that was one of my memories about it, and how good he and JG worked together. I love JG too now, boy. Jeremy Garrett, he's really good. Jeremy works at camp in Thibodeau. I have probably 14 pro coaches that work in that camp. Ronnie, you hear me? 14.
I hear you.
And wow. I don't enlist those guys. I mean, they call me. I don't call them. So, and I tell them when they come, I say, look, you understand now, you're not coming down here to sign autographs. You're coming down here to work. And they do. They really do a good job coaching the kids in that camp. It's probably the best camp staff ever assembled, to be honest with you, because it's got some really great high school coaches. And I have the same ones every year. I mean, same high school coaches come back. But then again, having 14, I think it is this year, NFL guys, they do a good teaching job, boy, they really do. So it's a good camp. It's fundamentals.
How long have you been doing that camp?
30 years.
30 years, wow.
Yep, 30 years. So but we don't recruit. We don't measure them and time them. I mean, it's all about helping them be better high school football players. We don't get a lot of stars. A lot of, back in the day, I told Coach Saban one time, I said, he would call me. He would call me before I could get home and say, who'd you like in the camp? And I told him one day, I said, Coach, I don't get those kids anymore. They go to the Alabama, Auburn, or LSU, or Tennessee. They go to be seen and recruited. What I get is a bunch of kids that really want to be good high school football players. And we think we do a good job enhancing their chances and everything, because we do a good job of teaching fundamentals. That's all it is, fundamentals. Should be the name of it. It should be fundamental camp is what it should be. But we have a good group of kids that come down there. In fact, Coach Saban said to me, boy, I wish I got more of those guys. Mm-hmm. Because, the universities now get a lot of name guys and for their camps. And they've kind of changed the camps over the years. There's a lot of one-day camps now and stuff like that. But ours is 4 days, and it's 3 practices a day. So it's pretty intense, to be honest with
you. Talk a little bit about, you talked about kids, where they're coming from and that sort of thing. Does it matter when you're recruiting where kids from? I mean, does it, if you've got a kid that is from Alabama and he can come to Auburn or Alabama, or you can go take a kid from California or Texas or New York or wherever, which one, all things being equal, which one are you going to take and why?
Well, I guess it would be first thing I'd have to ask you who I was recruiting for.
Good point.
You know what I mean? But you know, I think if you're at Alabama or Auburn, it ain't bad getting an Alabama kid. You know, I like Alabama kids. I like there's a toughness about Alabama kids that I really like. Let me tell you this story. So we had this camp, I told you, 30 years. Last year we had 778 linemen in the camp. Now that's offensive and defensive linemen. So that's a big camp for linemen, you know. We tried to have one in Texas. My partners and I tried to have one in Texas. And we gave it 11 years, okay? The first year we were there, we had 17 kids to quit.
Wow.
Okay? And we laugh about, we hadn't had 17 kids quit in Thibodeau in the 30 years. There are areas where there's the toughness that you need to play the game and all that kind of stuff. There are areas in the country where you mentioned California. I'm not really keen on California kids, to be honest with you. I think if you get a lot of them on your team, you got a problem.
I agree with you.
Coach Osborne told me that one time when he was killing people out at Nebraska. He told me, he said, we've charted it, and the more California kids that we get, the more inconsistent our record and everything. But there are areas that, there are different areas. You know that. You've been in the recruiting business long enough to know. There are areas and there are schools. There's certain schools I love to get kids out of because I know they've been saucered and blown, and they've been, they've come up in a culture that they can be coached hard, they work hard, and they enjoy and love the game of football. That ain't true everywhere, but it matters where a kid comes from a lot.
I think culturally it's different in California than it is here.
I think so too. And I was out there, coached out there in 2013. I was back out there in 2016. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little different. The athlete is the athlete, but the culture's different. That's the big thing, So, but I like the Southern kids.
Did you enjoy working at USC? You lived in the hotel across the street, right?
Yeah, I did. People used to ask me, how do you handle that traffic in LA? I said, ain't nothing to it. I mean, I didn't tell them I was living directly across the street, and they'd come and get me every day in a golf cart.
There you go.
Bring me to work. And at night they would drive me home back to the hotel in a golf cart. So the traffic never really was a factor. Yeah. If I'd have been going another block or two, it would have been, but it wasn't.
Was Donna out there?
Who?
Was Donna out there with you?
Oh, yeah. Because in 2013, when I went out there, they had played 3 games. So I joined the staff. They had 3 that and you've heard the story about them firing Kiffin on the tarmac and all that kind of stuff. That was that time. He was going out the door when I was coming in the other door, and everything. But we won 8 straight games, and really it was an enjoyable experience. We had 52 scholarship players. Think about that. 52. And,
wow.
But it was the 3rd year of probation. So they'd been not able to recruit like normal and everything. So, but it was a good experience. And then they brought me back out there in 2016. But yeah, I enjoyed it. And our son, Jeff, who was living at that time in LA. So it was like stealing, I mean, we were living in the Radisson Hotel, eating free, getting paid pretty good, and getting to see our son every day, So it was a really good experience. I coached Leonard Williams too. You know who I'm talking about?
I do.
Maybe the best one I ever coached. I mean, I'm not saying he is, but he's way up there. I'll tell you that. Boy, was he something else. He's had a great pro career too. He's really he's an exceptional player. Boy, he really is.
Nathan, you had a question?
Pete, I was going to ask you. You mentioned a while ago, particularly the mindset of it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, and things that have worked. You've seen them work throughout your coaching career. What are some other facets that you've had to evolve with throughout your coaching career, going from the 70s all the way up into your time at LSU in the 2020s? Like, what are the things that have remained the same throughout decades, and what are some things maybe with modern offenses that you've had to change?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question, Nathan. I really do. I've answered that question a number of times over the years. So when I answer this thing, I've given it a lot of thought, to be honest with you. Okay. The evolution of the game, when I started coaching in 64, okay, so that wasn't yesterday, right? I mean, the evolution of the game has been amazing to be a part of and watch. I think the first thing was we started throwing the ball a little bit more. When I first started coaching in high school in 64, we had 22 of us. We were all over there on one hash. The formation were all tight, close in formations, and therefore the defense was all tight, close in. And we were killing each other on the hash. Well, as the game began to change and spread a little bit, and I would say Spurrier had the real effect on the Southeastern Conference as far as spreading the field like he did. The receivers began to change. Early on, Mac Brown coached our receivers at Southern Miss in the 70s. And we would throw them a pass every now and then just to keep them on the team. Their job was to stalk corners and crack safeties and catch a ball every now and then. That was what it was all about for a wide receiver. So they started putting these guys in receiver positions that were power forwards. They had length and they could catch a BB and they could run with the ball after they caught it and all that stuff. So that changed the corners. And Coach Saban had a corner one time that I was trying to get him interested in. And I said, Coach, his feet are so quick. And he said, Pete, he's a little bitty guy. He said, they got receivers that beating peanuts off the top of his head. And that changed the corner play. Okay. And the formations began to spread. And we played Army when I was at Auburn. Ronnie, you were with us. We played Army in a bowl game. And my players had never seen three backs in the backfield. Army was that wishbone stuff, and they had no concept of wishbone or option, dive option, and all that stuff. They were more accustomed to no backs or one back than there were three backs. They were like, dang, they have three backs back here in the backfield, So the backs began to change. And they started throwing to the backside of the backfield or splitting the backs and running wheel routes and things like that. So now that changed the linebackers. The guys that I grew up watching play linebacker and everything, Ray Nitsky, y'all don't even know who those guys are. Ray Nitsky and who else played? Sam Huff. Those guys today, in today's game, they would be guards. They would be offensive guards because ain't no way they could run with the backs and play the field the way you have to do today. So it really changed the linebackers. So, Nathan, what I'm saying to you, they have spread the field out. They put athletes on the corners. They've changed the backs. They expect you hear them talk about a pro back when you're going to draft. He can catch a ball out of the backfield. Well, That thing that we never threw to a back in the day. You know, a screen pass maybe, but if the game is it began to evolve into getting a wider field and different athletes on the edges, it changed the defense and it changed the safeties. The safeties now are big linebackers or fast linebackers or what they are, and the linebackers are a little bit bigger safeties. The safeties and the linebackers have become one. Okay, now in answering that question, Nathan, which I really like, I'm glad you asked me that question. People ask me, how are you still relative at 84? Okay. And I go through that scenario I just gave you. Here's what hasn't changed. What we refer to as the box. Okay. There are 5 offensive linemen required to be in that box. They number 50 through 79. It's the same dudes. Okay. Now they're bigger and stronger and all that. I mean, they've evolved in that area, and the blocking schemes are better. The protection schemes are better, but they're the same 5 guys. Okay. Their job is to move people around in the running game, and their job is to protect the quarterback in the passing game. That hadn't changed. Okay. Well, my job had never changed either. You know, I mean, I'm doing the same thing I was doing years ago. We got 4 guys, 4 anchor points in there. Okay. And our job is to not let them move us around and to play the run, play our gaps in the run and protect the linebackers where they can play their gaps. And then to affect the quarterback with pass rush. So the box is doing the same. It's doing the same thing it always was. How about that for an answer, Nathan?
That's a good answer.
Pretty good.
I told you, I didn't just think that up. I practiced it because people have asked me, how are you still so relevant? People still hiring you and all that kind of stuff. Well, the box ain't changed. I just happen to work in a place where the box, Trickett's the same way, the oldest guy on the field in the NCAA.
That's what I was about to ask you. What was it like going up against Trickett every day in practice?
I loved it. I loved it. Very competitive. But we worked together good. Rick and I worked together. We coached 3 different places together, and we competed. Okay, but it was a healthy competition because he realized those were his defensive linemen, and I realized those were my offensive linemen too on game day. You know what I mean? So I love Trickett because Trickett's always got his oars in the water now. He's working to win the game, and I love people like that. I thought he did an outstanding job. He got mad with me in 23 when I went back to work at LSU. When they called me and I went back over there and coached 9 games, I guess, 8 or 9 games. He called me and told me, he said, "You just took my record. I was the oldest working coach or on the field coach in the NCAA, and you just beat me out for that." I said, "Well, just hang on, Trick, because I ain't going to be here but 1 year, man. I'll be out. You can get it back,
Yeah, I tell you a story. My son thought his soccer coach was being too hard on him. He kept complaining about it. So I took him over to see Trickett. And I said, if you want to know what hard coaching is, just watch him for a few minutes.
Yeah, he does. He does a good job, though. He's effective in his coaching.
And off the field,
he works hard, man. He works really hard. Yeah, I'm a big believer in him. I'm a big fan of his. Yeah,
I love him. I always have.
Yeah.
But before we let you go, how big is the Iron Bowl?
It's one of the most amazing things I've ever been a part of. I mean, I've been to South Carolina. I coached at South Carolina against Clemson. People think that's a big one, I coached at Oklahoma State against Oklahoma. People think that's a big one. I coached at Mississippi State against Ole Miss. People think that's a big one. Okay. So I've been privileged to be in some of those rivalry deals.
Coached at Florida too.
Florida against Florida State. Yep. Nothing compares to the Iron Bowl. Nothing. I mean, and what I like about it, what I really like about the Iron Bowl and the Auburn Alabama rivalry, it's not a mean, dirty rivalry. It is a tremendous rivalry, but it sometimes Ole Miss and Mississippi State would sometimes it bothered me. Sometimes it was a mean rivalry, and I was at Ole Miss one day. I was dodging damn objects being thrown out of the stands all day, and kids were fighting on the field, and there's no place for that. But I think Auburn and Alabama get after each other as well as you can get after people legally. But it is to me a great rivalry, but it's a really healthy rivalry. You see it that way? You see it that way?
I do. I've worked at some places. I was at Florida and at LSU, and man, Auburn and I. My wife went to Florida. I met her when I was down there, and so she had she'd been around it, and I took her to her first Iron Bowl, and she looks at me. She'd been there about 15 minutes, and she said, "I won't tell you what she said on the air, but she said, are you serious? Are you kidding me? This is."
Yeah. It was special, boy, I tell you. And I grew up wanting to coach an Iron Bowl. I mean, as a kid growing up, my goal was to play in the Southeastern Conference. And as I look back on it, I thought I was good enough, but as I look back on it, I wasn't good enough. But then my goals began to change to where I wanted to coach in the Southeastern Conference. And fortunately, I had 30 years, which that ain't bad to have. That's the reason I'm so damn gray-headed. 30 years of the SEC. But it's such a great league, man. It's such a great league. I feel so privileged to have had a chance to work that long in the Southeastern Conference. And there are no football fans like the South. When I first went to the Eagles, I think we were playing Pittsburgh, and it was a big in-state rival thing. And one of the coaches said to me there were several of them with me, but around me, but one of them said to me afterwards, they said, "Boy, you ever seen a stadium like that?" And I said, "No, it was something." In the back of my mind, I was thinking, "Hey, that ain't nothing. That ain't nothing. You ought to be in the South, in the Southeastern Conference every Saturday, But there's the football, it's the best,
It just means more, right?
It just means more. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Coach, we appreciate your time.
I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. Good questions too, Nathan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
Okay, take care.